رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ولعنة الله الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Kindly recite the salawat and move forward. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. We were discussing yesterday the vertical and the horizontal axis, in which we stated that the vertical one was the evolutionary one, which gives us the sense of goal, aspiring towards the most complete, and actively reaching out to God in order to actualize our own potential as individuals, but within both an individual and a collective capacity. The horizontal axis marks the law or the instructions of Islam that were intended to increase the whole process of self-realization in the vertical. Now, with that, we stated a few things that I need to recap on before we go into the salient sort of traits of this ahkam system, because that will be extremely relevant in what is to come. We stated that the prophetic mission was to make godly individuals of mere mortals. And the morality that we encounter within religion is best described as spiritual morality, in which there is, I'm going to use this word, God centricity, in which we are becoming God-like through God at every point. And he gave the bare minimal of instructions and ahkam, and allowed human beings to evolve through these basic principles, create their own systems, and check them against the vertical axis. That if it yields growth, it's fine. If it doesn't yield growth, it needs to be checked again. Back to basics means this, that if something is not productive, intuitively it doesn't make sense. Intuition, we described, is rooted in the property of existence. Then we went on and we stated that there is a further categorization of ahkam in the traditional systems. You have devotions, we have consumables, we have transactions, we have family law, we have capital punishment, etc., etc., etc. They are either individualistic or they are communal and social. Those that are social are highly, highly important, because they are constituting to the well-being of every individual within the community. So both are equally important, the individual and the community, and the Prophet was mindful of all of this. Having arrived at this point, let us talk about some other beautiful features of the ahkam system in relation to the vertical and the horizontal trends that we have described. You will never ever find in the Islamic ahkam system that any of the regulation are devoid of the presence of God. It's amazing. The Prophet was asked, well, what is a story of life? And he said, in a nutshell, he was asked, he said, it is to fulfill the rights of God and rights of human beings. Islam strikes this beautiful balance between the here and the hereafter, between human and the community, between the individual and the community, between the body and the spirit. You will find this balanced state within the ahkam of Islam. Read the Quran. Wherever you find the regulations being given, you immediately find God placed in the middle of it. What does that say? That says that the ahkam, its central theme is to acquire that godliness. It cannot be devoid of that godliness. Now, as we describe this, let us pick on a feature that we all understand very apparently. And that is the whole feature of mustahabbat. Yes? Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed mustahabbat through the Prophet within the ahkam system. What does that mean? You see, Allah, we gave this example. Allah says, Aqimus salah wa atuz zakah. Yes? Establish prayer and give zakat everywhere. He doesn't talk about any morality of it. But there is social morality. There is social spirituality. But then at certain places Allah says, وَمِنَ اللَّيْلِ فَتَهَجَّدْ بِهِ نَافِلًا. At night pray the nawafil prayers. عَسَى أَن يَبْعَثَكَ رَبُّكَ مَقَامًا مَحْمُودًا. Your Lord may elevate you to a praiseworthy rank. Why does the Lord give this guarantee for a mustahab prayer that He does not give for the wajib prayer? Because in the mustahab prayer, it is not a mere slave fulfilling an ordained right, but they are meaningfully finding their Lord worthy of devotion. And as they are ignited from within, and they make that personal effort, that growth is guaranteed to them. It is that aspect that is brought into the ahkam at every level that provides for or assures that vertical trend. Again, the salah is described, Inna salah tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. Indeed, the prayers wards away from that which is unchaste and reprehensible. That there is a spiritual, moral awaiting within this hukam. Similarly, when we read Nahjul Balagha, Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayhi states, he states, do not pray zakat for the sake of paying it. Pray the zakat with the intention of giving it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, the reward of zakat will be wasted. But think about it. When we pay the zakat, the pragmatic function of zakat is attained, isn't it? The pragmatic function of zakat is attained. We are feeding the poor. It's a welfare system. We'll talk about zakat later on in a more detailed manner and khums. But here, when we pay the zakat, it attends to its function as being a welfare tax. It feeds the poor, shelters those who are homeless. But there is something else awaiting inside zakat. And that is the personal growth of an individual through that act. And Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayhi says that zakat should be paid with the intention of giving it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which then ensures personal growth on the vertical line. In this way, we are seeing the ahkam shrouded with the spiritual morality. What do we mean? That the vertical trend, which was what? One, the theoretical aspiring to the completion of the human soul. And two, self-realization through becoming spiritually moral. This end game is shrouded. The ahkam are shrouded in this end game. The ahkam have to yield the vertical trend. Otherwise, the ahkam are useless. But they might be useful in terms of the body. But they are not useful in terms of actualizing the human potential in its entirety. Allah says, وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا فَأَحْسِنْ كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ وَابْتَغِ فِي مَا أَتَاكَ اللَّهُ دَارَ الْآخِرَةِ وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا وَأَحْسِنْ كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ. From whatever Allah has given you, seek the hereafter. But do not forget your share of the world and do good as Allah has done good to you. You can see this is an overall ethos that God has given you. that God has given us, that whatever is in this world is a means to gain that vertical trend, and at the same time to become benevolent, and beyond that and become godly, and to do good to others. Now in this way we find every hukam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we want to go into it just a little bit more before we then go into other salient traits of ahkam. As I said, they're very useful for the lectures that are to follow. Every hukam is shrouded in what we call the end game spiritual morality, which is attained through keeping God at the center of every hukam. Now, when we go into transactions, what do the laws say? Transact, but take little and give more through the wholesomeness of your own soul. And trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala immediately in that transaction, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide you more through His own grace, because He is the real key to the heavens and the earth. He has determined your systems for you. You are just a mere key to unlock the treasury, and this is the way to unlock it. When you transact, give a little bit more for the sake of Allah, take a little bit less. Immediately spirituality has been brought into a mundane transaction. Think about it. Into a mundane transaction, spirituality is brought about it. The ahkam are highly spiritual, and they don't work in the religious sense, yarhamakallah, unless and until that spirituality is realized. Think about the law system when people go to court. Do you know, in the Islamic system, before we had forensic sort of tests and examinations and evidences, the people were required to take oath in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When an accused does not have defense, he can defend himself by rebuttaling the accusation through taking an oath in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, I swear by Allah that I am not guilty of the accused crime. Which court system will take that on board? It is only a spiritual being that would be deterred from using the name of God in vain or lying through the name of God when that spiritual being is active and they see God as the real part of life and the real achievement and the one that they are going to, and the end game as spiritual accomplishment or spiritual morality. You can see this. It's scattered everywhere. Or when there is accusation that a husband accuses his wife of unchaste behavior, he is brought to the court. A person came to the Prophet and he said, what's the law for this? I have no witness. The Prophet said, I have no law in my system for this. Go away. The verses were revealed that when men accuse their wives of unchaste behavior and there are no witnesses, then let each one of them take 4 oaths in the name of God. 4 oaths in the name of God. I swear by Allah, he has to say 4 times. And the 5th one, let him say, I swear by God that if I am making a false accusation, then may the wrath of God befall me. And that was so heavy upon them that it deterred the people from making such accusations. And a woman can rebuttal it by saying 4 times, I am not guilty of what he says. And the 5th time she would say, I swear by God that if I am lying, then may the curse of God befall me. You can see here that this process in itself requires deep sense of spirituality within the human agent who is then going to take this oath on. They have to have that deep recognition of God, and here is a hukam, but this hukam is highly shrouded in spirituality. In this way, we do not find any hukam within Islam but that it is shrouded in spirituality. When you are slaughtering an animal, do you know this? There are hadiths, and they're all valid. They say that if a Jew slaughters an animal for you, and he cuts the jugular veins and does not sever the whole neck, it's fine, you can consume it. It's Sahih hadith of Imam Ali. Somebody said, I did not face the Kaaba. The Imam said, it's fine. Somebody said, I forgot to take the name of Bismillah. Imam said, it's fine. But the ideal spirituality of slaughtering is what? That the animal is given something to drink. It isn't frightened by looking at other animals. The animal does not witness the slaughter of other animals. And then very gently and calmly, the person who conducts the slaughter says to the animal, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I am about to conduct this act, and you are about to feed hungry stomachs, that spirituality is induced even in consumptions and consumable. That makes it wholesome because there is something that happens to the animal. There is something in the mind of the person who slaughters. There is some wholesomeness that comes about it. Even the law of consumption is shrouded in spirituality. But if the person were to forget Bismillah, it's still worthy of consumption because the blood has been drained and the spinal cord has not been severed. But the ideal one is that spiritual conduct, to spiritually slaughter. Then, when we consume, we are told, say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank Allah before you take a morsel. When you finish, say Alhamdulillah. We are told, when you see water, sip it gently. Respect water. Salawat. This reminds me to drink water. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Say Bismillah, respect the water, sip it gently. Say Alhamdulillah, breathe. There is spirituality about it. Nobody saw the funny side of that, did they? Apart from one person. Another salawat, please. You, God bless you, the American audience is a very naive and a sincere and an innocent audience. You see, you're not sinners like us from Britain. Everything we say has a double-edged meaning. You guys are very sincere and genuine. Inshallah, may it rub off on me. Recite a salawat and come far forward, please. The water, Islam teaches us, has a life. Treat it gently and it will work for you. Yes? The Prophet of Islam was something else altogether. He would look at the mountain and say to the mountain, peace be with you. I love this mountain and the mountain loves me. He understood that there is life in everything. Treat everything spiritually. So that was the end game. The ahkam, the whole state of ahkam was, before anything else, was to yield that vertical trend. So participating in any hukam requires first that lofty intention so that it brings about that vertical trend of self-realization. And that is how the hukam was supposed to function. They weren't meant to be blank, empty laws. Islamic system, if applied at any level of society, it will function. No doubt it will function. If you cut people's heads off, it will deter them from committing crimes. God forbid, it's such a barbaric act, isn't it? If you cut people's hands off, it will prevent them from stealing. We're going to revisit the hands one at some point. But, what it will not yield is spiritual beings. It will govern merely the bodies. It will not bring about that ideal state of godliness or God human. It will not bring about that God-like human being. Yes? And that is the end game. And that is how the ahkam were meant to be. Now, when we say back to basic, we want to not look at the value of ahkam in how much they are yielding only at a social level. We want to see how much the ahkam are yielding in line with spiritual morality. And that is when we will say that if they are not yielding spiritual morality, then the problem is either in the intentions of the people, or the problem is either with something else that is inconsistent with the growth property and existential property. If that has gone through, then we come to other salient features as we go through this. One of the most beautiful feature of the ahkam is that the Prophet introduced it very gradually and very slowly. And it's exactly in tune with the nature of existence and human existence. We grow from weakness into strength, don't we? These ahkam assist us in self-realization of our spiritual morality from rank to rank to rank to rank. I mean, these examples you've heard again and again and again. Just hear it again to just refresh our memories, yes? The Imam has said, right, that your children are your kings till the age of 7. Don't burden them. After the age of 7, teach them. They are your slaves. After the other 7, they are your equals. Treat them well and confer and consult them. Look at the beautiful way in which Islam has understood this. Do you know, in the UK, we used to put our children in the rat race of education. Early education, extracurricular education. Do you know what happens? By the time they hit 14, they lose all enthusiasm towards studies. And when they grow into adults, they are never fully matured adults because that childhood has been left unfulfilled. They have never been allowed to be children, to be mischievous. Whereas the more mischievous they are, of course, I don't mean don't discipline them. Yes, we have to discipline them, the social protocol. Because sometimes people get the wrong end of the stick and it becomes a huge headache for the Maulana afterwards facing questions. All right, I'm thinking you're beginning, we are on the same page, aren't we? When I make a comment that is humorous, by all means share a smile, yes? It's nice. What does the Imam say? He said, Mu'min is the one whose smile is always on his face, yes? And whose grief is in his heart. The Maulana is not getting off, that's grief, that's in the heart. He's made a nice comment, smile on the face, yes? Salawat. Just shows I'm getting used to the pulpit, doesn't it? The children are supposed to be mischievous because touching, feeding, seeing, speaking are the primary building blocks. Yes? The Imam has said, don't talk about God to these children. They don't have understanding of God. They're very tender minds. Don't talk about God. You can't say God one. He doesn't have eyes and he sees. It confuses the little child, the little brain. They don't understand these things. Talk to them about beautiful things. Look at this beautiful tree. Look at how the bird comes to the nest. Look at how it feeds its children. Why don't we feed other people who are thirsty or who are hungry? Teach them righteousness in this way. The sixth Imam has said, your children see you as their gods and their lords. When you promise something, fulfill it. Because that will then instill confidence in them with their God, their real God. Look at how beautifully the system of ahkam has been introduced. Don't teach them about ahkam. Don't make them fast at the age of 4, 5, and 6. This is wrong. It's totally wrong. Make them pray 100 rakat namaz at that tender age. What are we doing? Don't do all these things. They are supposed to play. They're supposed to be mischievous. If a child says Allahu Akbar once, the hadith says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Allah will forgive every sin of the parent and the teacher. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. For the first time. Do you know how beautiful the Prophet was? He was standing. This is a hadith. Imam Hussain Salamullah alayhi started speaking. Later than Imam Hassan, yes? So they were waiting for him to speak. The Prophet was in his mihrab, he said Allahu Akbar. Imam Hussain said Allahu Akbar. For the first time. The Prophet said again Allahu Akbar. Imam Hussain said again Allahu Akbar. The Prophet said Allahu Akbar 7 times. And that is why the takbir, doing it 7 times, has become mustahab. He is in his wajib prayer. His grandson is saying Allahu Akbar. The great Prophet is setting a law for the whole ummah through a beautiful act of love and compassion and mercy with his grandson. Look at how beautiful that logic is. The ahkam system was a very gradual one. We are forgetting this. The law of alcohol came how? Very, very gradually. Look at the verses of Surah Baqarah. And then up to Surah Ma'idah. Look at a gradual process in which the ahkam system was introduced of alcohol, because the community was steeped in that habit. Slowly, gradually, the morality of it was explained, the effects of it were explained, and finally Allah said, فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ? Shall you now end this habit? And finally, they were told not to consume alcohol. It was such a beautiful introduction. This is how ahkam need to be understood. It's a very gradual process. Now the ramification of this will come at another point. Now, so the ahkam were gradual. Now the other thing that is so beautiful about the ahkam system is that the ahkam of the Quran are ambiguous. This ambiguity is the greatest charm. I'm going to talk about abrogation as well in a minute. This ambiguity is the greatest charm of ahkam. What does ambiguity mean? That Allah seldom clarifies the hukam inside the Quran. He says, فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. Wash your faces and your hands till the elbow. Yes? Now till the elbows, the Imami say is the what? The whole extent. And the non-Imami says it could be the direction. The fact of the matter is, before we go into semantic and linguistic analysis of the verse, immediately the Quran has opened itself up to a variety of interpretations, hasn't it? The ambiguity of the Quran has opened itself up to a variety of interpretation. So the person who washes it this way can also justify it. The person who washes it this way can also justify it. Of course, the hadith of the Imam clarifies it, but I'm going to explain that afterwards, as the lesser weight of a context. And the Quran is a greater weight. That's going to be one of the tools in which that we use as tools to deal with this problem that we're having. But the Quran has realized that human process of interpretation will vary from one to the other. And it's left that leverage there to allow for plurality of interpretations. Amazing, isn't it? So that the person who washes this way is also right, and the person who washes this way is also right in their own ways. The Quran says, Aqimus Salat, does not say fold your arms or open your arms. Yes, there's a hadith in one of the Sahih Sittah that the Prophet left his arms open and prayed. But that's fine. The Quran doesn't say anything, and we're going to deal with that later on, of the heavy weight and lesser weight. But what does it mean? That those who pray this way, those who pray this way are both okay. The Quran is leaving it open. It is giving that leverage. It is giving the leverage in ahkam. Ahkams are forms. The essence is what? The spirituality. The spiritual morality is the essence. Now tell me, my dear brothers, we spoke of individual cultures yesterday, and we spoke of binding universal social cultures, haven't we? When we pray, my dear brothers, we pray with our arms open and shut, together with each other, because the Quran has given that leverage of interpretation. And that is a human spiritual social need and a spiritual need, that people of variety can come together and pray and see the charm of Allah in the beauty of variety. Think about it carefully. Which one of us looks the same? Nobody. We are all different, and yet we are the same, aren't we? This is variety in existence. This is plurality in existence. It's the absolute norm and yardstick. Find me two trees that are the same. Nay, find me two blades of grass which are the same. You won't. The very difference of location makes them different. Find me anything that is plurality in this world, anything in which there is two things, the one and the same. There is nothing but individuality. The Quran is mindful of this. This is how the ahkam system is supposed to operate in the first instance, that it allows itself for a variety of interpretations. And then what? The ambiguity also arrives for an evolutionary renewal on reinterpretation. So I'll just give an example to that. As-sariq was-sariqa faqta'u aydiyahuma. The male and the female thief cut their hands off, yes? But the Quran is already coming in a existing context. And in that context, you can't do anything but cut the hands off. But there is no subsequent law. So according to our law system, if somebody's fingers are cut, they have perfect right to go and stitch them back on. Yes? And if in a futuristic world, people can genetically regrow their fingers, then it will be a case of somebody going in one room, cutting their fingers off, in another room, regrowing their fingers, going out and stealing again. What purpose does it serve? So obviously, there is an essence in there, yes? And there is a form. That's what I'm trying to point out here. That the forms, because of the ambiguity of the Quran, allows for renewal. The ahkams allow for them to be renewed. The Quran has given that leverage. Again, look at the salah. As I said, I want to deal with one or two more aspects today. Look at the salah. Ruku and sujood is mentioned in the Quran, hasn't it? Facing Qibla has been mentioned in the Quran. Yes, facing Qibla is in the Quran. Ruku and sujood are mentioned in the Quran. Surah Hamd or other surah or none of these things are mentioned in the Quran. In fact, there's a hadith from the 8th Imam that says that if you pray a meaningful part of a surah after Hamd, it's fine, like our Sunni brothers do. He said, it's fine, don't worry about it. There is that much leverage in the ahkam. But more than that, look at the beautiful way in which Allah expresses this pragmatic facet of ahkam, because ahkams have also got this salient feature of being pragmatic, applicable immediately. The Quran says, if you're in any fear, then pray your salah on horseback or whilst running and walking. Whilst running and walking, we dispense with ruku, with sujood, with qu'ud, we dispense with all of those things, don't we? We dispense with this direction of Kaaba as well. Yet the prayer is the prayer. The essence is there. The form is being changed. This is what the Quran allows for within ahkam, that it's a very real system that is there to ignite that beautiful spirituality. But it has ambiguity, so it can be fashioned and refashioned. It can have a variety of interpretations. It does not lose the plurality and the pluralistic nature of human existence. It binds that plurality together. Look at the charm in these ahkams. Look at how wonderful Islam is. Look at the foresight that the Blessed Prophet had. Look at how divine this religion is by just looking at these systems. The other salient feature is that it is very, very pragmatic. Extremely pragmatic. I'll talk about abrogation if we reach to it. Extremely pragmatic. What do we mean by pragmatic? It is applicable. Absolutely, immediately you can apply it without it infringing upon our lives. In fact, it assists the process of life, gentle life. How? I'll give one or two examples and then come to the central theme, the example that I want to give. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Nisa says, He says, when people talk unbefittingly of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, walk away from them. And when they resume in proper conversation, go and join them again. Why does he say this? Because Islam is a real religion. He's giving hukam, but the hukam is a human hukam. That look, this is your community, this is your friend's circle, this is your family. You can't cut away from the whole world. You have to be with the world. The Muslims were a fresh community within Medina. They were outnumbered. So the people were speaking ill of Islam, of God, of Prophet. So Allah said, when you hear that Allah's signs are mocked with, then walk away. As soon as you see that they are talking about something else, go and resume. How wonderfully pragmatic this is. Again, in Surah Ma'idah, when the Prophet, after the battle of Uhud, when the Prophet was told to attend the trade fair, the Madinian community, they did not go with the Prophet. They were like us, human beings, filled with skepticism. They were frightened souls. Allah said to the Prophet, Allah does not commission but you and those who are ready to follow you, nobody else. So Prophet with a small band of people, make way. Yes? What happens here is that the Meccans sent Khalid bin Walid with a group of soldiers to ambush the Prophet and to put them to death. What happened was that Khalid bin Walid was inside a cave and he saw the Prophet and his group of people in front of him. It was time for prayers. Look at the pragmatic nature of the ahkam. Beautiful. It's in sync with human requirement. It is easy on humanity. It's not burdensome. And it yields that vertical trend. The Prophet was told, pray. And pray in the front. Let a group stand behind you. And carry their arms. And once they do their sajdas and rukus, let them leave and another group come and pray behind you. This is Salatul Khawf. The prayer in a state of fear of ambush. Khalid bin Walid was so moved by looking at this scene. He said, amazing. How must their God be that even at the time of devotion, he is mindful of their worldly needs. It is as pragmatic as that. And that was the beginning of the change of Khalid bin Walid and his reversion to Islam. This is the pragmatic nature of the ahkam, that they are highly applicable and they are highly human friendly and they are mindful of the human context and human situations. This is the pragmatic nature of these ahkams. Again, abrogation. Beautiful theory in the Quran. Abrogation. The laws are cancelled and replaced by other laws. Why? In the evolutionary trend, we outdo certain ahkams. We need other ahkams as the community gets more and more sophisticated. I'll give one example. These are just the general trend, general facets of the ahkam. The Muslims in Medina were always being mocked at by the host community. In fact, the Muslims were not really the guests, they were also hosts, but the majority who were non-Muslims. When they were mocked at, in Surah Baqarah, the Prophet is being told, pardon them. Turn your face away from them and walk away. Yeah? Look at how pragmatic this hukum is. How pragmatic. However, when the Muslims became established, a verse comes and abrogates the first verse and says, now when they mock at you, stand your ground and respond. Why? Because the Muslims had become stronger. I remember when in the 70s we were in the UK, we used to be frightened of praying in public places. And when people mocked at us, we had to bear it. But now we have our human religious rights and we can demand it. We are in that position of strength. It's the same thing that's happened again. But you see through that how the ahkam system works. It is there in sync with human condition of growth and slowly brings about beautiful growth, and the abrogation falls in that. That is how the ahkams are supposed to be understood. Then again, when we go into the ahkam system, we see salawat. That these ahkams, they are always changing and they are based on capacities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very mindful in making ahkam a very productive force in the attainment of the central goal, which is self-realization. In accordance with capacity, the rights are being given. Now we want to deal with this in parts or in passing as we go along now. For example, inheritance for women, yes? Or the blood money of women. The role of women were as carers, and the role of man was providers. Ar-rijal qawwamuna ala nisa. Men have priority over women. But then Allah says, bima faddalallah ba'duhum ala ba'd. In accordance with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to some over others. So man have that body and built in which they can provide. Women have that gentle constitution in which they become ideal carers in that context. Can you see that? So now a woman is provided for all the time. Whatever she receives in inheritance is her saving. She doesn't have to use from that. Yes? It's in accordance with their capacity in which they're operating within the society. When there is a death of a provider, there is a greater loss. When there is the death of a carer, there is a lesser loss. That is how they used to calculate it. And therefore the blood money of a man was greater than that of a woman. But if today in the American society, a woman is a carer and a provider, then how would the inheritance systems be? It would be turned on its head, wouldn't it? Yusuf Sani gives a fatwa that men and women, inheritance, blood money should be equal. I beg to differ. I say no, it's highly based on capacities and aptitudes. If a woman is a carer and a provider, her inheritance should be double that of man. But if that is a proper rule, not one odd woman here and there, as we explained yesterday, that the horizontal goes in accordance with majority, if you recall, yes? And today, if a female was killed, and she's a provider, her blood money will be the same as man, if not more, if he's in addition to being a provider, a carer. Can you see that? The nature, the ahkam were built on capacities. Now, the verse says that when you give debts, lend money, or when death approaches you, get two people to bear witness, and let a scribe write it down. Now, if you don't find a scribe, get two men to bear witness. And if you don't find two men, then one man and two women. Okay? Listen to what the Quran says. This is why we don't understand ahkam, because we only read a bit of the Quran. Yes? On that note, somebody had stopped praying. So they asked him, why have you stopped praying? He said, it says in the Quran, La taqrabu salah. Don't approach prayer. He said, but the rest of the verse says something else. He said, but who can understand the whole Quran? So you only read that part of it and stopped praying. In any case, the Quran says that one man and two women. Why? So that if one woman were to forget, the other one would remind her. Why? Because back in the day, if you read Surah Al Imran, Ma'idah, Nisa, and prominently Surah Nisa, you will see how the Arabs were treating women. They were kept childlike. One man would inherit a woman, he would be killed. Another man would inherit him as just objects. And the aitam, the yatim, were just treated as entities to be used. And Quran comes and modifies all these cultures of filth, cultures of exploitation. My God, what the Quran has not done. Read it. Read these surahs. It's phenomenal what the Quran is saying. The women were never accustomed to retaining knowledge. They were kept immature. They were kept without education. Whereas the man used to participate in the art of retaining an oral transmission. They were accomplished narrators. They would retain knowledge and transmit it. The women were never given that opportunity. So obviously they had never actualized their faculties of retaining. And that's what the Quran is pointing at. So that if one may forget, the other one may remind her. Are you telling me today that you get a woman who's an astrophysicist and you say, oh, sister, if you forget, just in case, she will remember more than all of us. They have memories like elephants nowadays, don't they? They don't forget anything. Just look at our wives. Those ahkam were based on capacities. So here, what are we seeing? As I conclude today, the ahkam system was first and foremost spread amongst individuals and communities, and squarely geared towards the attainment of that central theme of self-realization by giving the high objective of God and placing God within it. Yes? Every time they are shrouded in spirituality. But beyond that, they were fashioned in a very realistic way in which they were in sync with the nature of existence. And the nature of human existence, which is gradual, which is pluralistic, which is pragmatic, which is capacity-based. These are the yardsticks of ahkam. And we will go in line with that when we say back to basics, these are the things that we need to understand once again. That are there ahkams, cultures, practices that are inconsistent with these points. You see, the whole existential motion of human being was to go from weakness to strength by them bearing responsibility. If anything defies this, it needs to be questioned, as I said, either placed in its historical proper place or said that it is not making sense in and of itself. And we'll give further yardsticks. One of the things that I notice is that people hesitate to display their emotions when it comes to Hussein ibn Ali salamullah alayhi. This is an opportunity, even if we can't shed tears, but we need to let go. Tears are very good. Crying is the greatest agency of spiritual self-realization. By Allah, on the night of Ashura, ask a person who has hoarded wealth, give it to me in the name of Hussein, he will give it all. This is what Hussein does. Hussein is the lifeline. He is the blood that flows within our veins. He is the name that our hearts beat in. He is the thought within our mind. He is the name upon our lips. This is what Hussein is. And how can his story not move us all? Because there is something in there that relates to all of us. When it comes to Hussein, don't have any inhibitions. Let it go. Love Hussein. I firmly believe in the truth of this hadith, that if anybody cries or feels like crying, then paradise is incumbent upon them. The fact of the matter is that intellectual truths do not move us. But if a person cries, it means that they are moved from the core of their being. And Allah commends this. He says, and there are people who recognize you as they recognize their own sons. And when they read the verses of the Quran, you see their eyes flooding with tears. For that is the deepest level of acknowledgement. Now, as we're going to tonight's Shahada, why should we not cry for Hussein? Why should we not feel for Hussein? Why should these hearts not break for Hussein ibn Ali? I was in Tehran when I was studying in Iran. A man came to me and he said, you say everything about Hussein, but there is one thing that your Hussein has not sacrificed. I said, what is that? He said, what Ibrahim has done. I said, please narrate it. He said, Ibrahim was commanded to leave Hajara and Ismail in the wilderness without any vegetation, without any water. He complies with that and leaves. I said, yes, it's true. Then I began to think and read the Quran. Ibrahim left them. Hajara is yelling at him, becoming highly emotional. It's not in the Quran, but it's in the tafsir. And saying, Ibrahim, what has possessed you? What are you doing? This child of yours will die. In whose hands and mercy do you leave me? Ibrahim turns away, goes to his horse or camel, and makes a prayer that is recorded within the Quran. O Lord, I have left my family in a place without any vegetation, without any water. O Lord, provide them from the best of the produce of this land, and make the hearts of the people drawn towards them mercifully. And Ibrahim has full assurance that his God will grant him that prayer. Hussein leaves his tents. Zainab falls at his feet. Brother, in whose care do you leave me? He raises her and says, oh sister, do not tear the arteries of my heart by your tears. There shall be no end to your tears after I have gone. This is how Hussein leaves his band. He sees very well that after his death, what is to come upon them. 6 children were trampled under the feet of raging soldiers as they plundered the tents. There is a sister of Hussein who is restless on the day of Ashura. She has 2 children with her, Aun and Muhammad. Her husband, Abdullah, has said to Zainab, I cannot accompany you, take my children. If ever Hussein needs assistance, you have my consent to give them away. This is the scene as recorded by the Maqatil. Zainab calls her Aun and her Muhammad. She combs their hair, beautifies them, places the best of garments upon them. And this is in the afternoon of Ashura, when majority of Hussein's forces have died. And now begins the single combat one-on-one. She prepares them and herself takes them to Hussein. Hussein looks at them, understands the intention of Zainab, and looks away. Zainab approaches him from the other side. He says, Zainab, Abdullah will be displeased. but Abdullah has given them to me for you. Hussein looks at them, his eyes are filled with tears. Zainab, how shall I give them to death? Zainab looks deep into his eyes. She says, oh brother, I do not have anything else. Let them defend you. Let them defend the honor that you stand for. Hussein allows them to go. The scene is this, Abbas Qummi narrates, that Zainab is inside her tent, praying that they do not return. She had told them that if you reach the Alqamah, bring back water for my thirsty brother. This is the scene that Hussein stands with Abbas at an elevated place, observing the battle of his two nephews, On and Muhammad, as they appear within the battlefield. Ibn Sa'd asks, who are these? He is told, these are the two sons of Zainab. I am amazed at the love that this sister has for her brother, that she has sent the apples of her eyes for destruction. The children are fighting. The army comes in numbers. Muhammad is struck. He falls to the ground. As he falls, On comes to him, takes his head into his lap and says, oh brother, I am soon to join you. As Muhammad On laments him, there's an attack mounted on Muhammad. As he wards off the blow, he too is struck. He cries out, oh uncle, receive my final farewell. Hussein descends from the hill and rides towards them. This is the scene that Hamid ibn Muslim describes, that Hussein takes the two bodies in a way that the chests are within the arms of Hussein, and as he walks back, their feet drag against the dust of Karbala. As he brings them back to the tents, the custom was that Zainab would be the first one to come out of the tent to lament for the dead. This time round, Hussein's glances search for his sister, but he does not find her anywhere. We are told by Abbas Qummi that Zainab knew well that if her brother were to see her, he would feel a sense of embarrassment. And when we see Akbar, we find Zainab falling at his body so that her brother's life is not deprived from his body at seeing the dagger within the chest of Akbar. Matam Hussein.